Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's event about the clear road ahead. We have some amazing guest speakers, Mark Whitfield himself, the chairman of Nissan Africa, and the MD of Nissan Egypt, as well as Sipho Nkosi. Thank you for joining us, the chairman of Sasol, and the discussion will be facilitated by tonight's well-known host and previous attendee and panelist, Epstein. So over to you, Arvin.
Hi, everyone, and good evening, and welcome to tonight's event. With us here, we have Sipho Nkosi and Mark Whitfield. Just a bit of background on the two gentlemen. Mark grew up within the ranks of Nissan, eventually becoming the managing director of South Africa at a young age. Mark's also been involved in steering Nissan through some exceptionally challenging times, and is now seen as a guru within the motor industry. In the early 2000s, Mark was transferred offshore to Nissan Scandinavia, and he currently, this was prior to lockdown, spends about 3 weeks a month in Cairo, and he heads up Nissan Egypt. Mark's currently the chairman of Nissan Africa. Mark is a very balanced individual. He's an empathetic leader, and he's well recognized and known for his EQ within the business sector. And on top of that, Mark's also a very charitable individual, and many organizations have benefited from that charitable flair he has. So welcome, Mark. Sipho is an interesting individual who I've known for many years, and I've been privileged to know for many years. He's a South African business person, entrepreneur, who founded Sipho Holdings many years ago. He's been at the head of 9 different companies and continues to get invited into many other. Currently, he chairs the Sasol Group. He's also the lead independent director of the well-known Sanlam Limited Insurance Group. He's the executive chairman of a number of different companies, but more so Tronics Holdings PLC, which is a chemicals company in the USA. He's also chairman of the Small Business Institute and an advisor in some form to on the President's Council here in South Africa. Sipho, in 2013, I had the good fortune of being on a panel when he was appointed South Africa's best entrepreneur, and he went on to represent South Africa in Monte Carlo thereafter. Sipho then joined the panel of judges, and together him and I have judged a number of different entrepreneurs over the past 7 years, and it's been a pleasure working with you on that, Sipho.
Thank you, sir.
Sipho was also one of the early starters of the Exara Resources Group, which he led as the chief executive officer, and we'll talk a bit about some of these challenges and accolades later on in the show. For those of you that have joined in the Johannesburg area, there might be a slight interruption due to load shedding, but we'll kick in and out, and we'll continue along. So, Sipho, I'm going to start with you this evening. And I know your story, which is fascinating, but just briefly, take us back to your childhood and just give us a perspective where you grew up, if you don't mind, very briefly. Thank you.
I can't remember very well, Ivan, but thank you very much. I grew up at a place called, a very famous one, called Nkandla. My basic schooling really was at a church that on Mondays through Friday, it was school, and then Sunday, it was church. So that really was my background. And then we moved to Vryheid, and I did my high school and finished there and went to University of Zululand and did my basic degree. Worked for Mike's Competition, which is Ford Motor Company, and then they fired me, and then I ended up in the US studying an MBA and other things, and eventually came back and joined the mining sector at Anglo, and I've been in the mining space since then.
Well done, Sipho, and I also know you had a very interesting childhood, and I've spoken to you about it. And I know it was in a challenging time in South Africa, and you grew up in a very disadvantaged environment. And well done to what you've achieved today and the contribution you've also made to South Africa in the business sector. And I know you spend a lot of time overseas because you're involved in different companies here. But we'll touch on a bit of that later. Mark, to yourself, I mean, getting into the motor industry must have been really exciting as a young guy, and exceptionally, I mean, Nissan, at that stage when you got in, Nissan was in a huge growth trajectory globally. And I mean, you've been through some times with Nissan, and the audience here this evening will certainly want to understand a bit about the motor industry, what's happened, you know, post the pandemic, well, in the current pandemic, because it's been very challenging for you. So maybe you can just take us briefly to how you got into the motor industry and where we are right now. Talk more about South Africa, then we'll touch on other parts of Africa later, Mike.
Ivan, thank you, and evening to everyone in this very cold evening in Johannesburg. And hopefully you're not going to be affected by load shedding. But effectively, I grew up in the motor industry. It was my first job was actually at Nissan. In fact, it was Datsun in those days. I joined as a management trainee in 1981, and that's the only place I've ever worked with Nissan and in the industry. I spent most of my life in the Nissan operation in South Africa. In those days, it was originally owned by Messina Mining, then was taken over by Sanlam, Sandcorp, and then in the late 90s, Nissan Motor Company, after the end of the apartheid era, reinvested in the country and purchased Nissan in South Africa. And I then spent a number of years in our truck division and then moved over to the Nordics and lived in Finland for 5 years before coming back to South Africa and spending my time really focusing on South Africa and Africa. And really Africa for me is a real passion in terms of how one can develop the auto industry and mobility in Africa. Most of my time at the moment I'm spending in Egypt, although about a week, at least a week or 10 days in South Africa. And fortunately, when lockdown happened, I was in South Africa. So I'm very happy to be here rather than Egypt. The industry, as we all know, is a key barometer in any part of the world of economic activity. And monthly auto stats are crucial to understand which way it's going. So certainly, I think the positive trend that we're starting to see as we come out of the lockdown is encouraging. There's small signs, but certainly positive as we go forward.
Thanks, Mike. But Mike, in South Africa, I mean, you've seen obviously the revenue drop tremendously, and obviously car sales have slowed down. I mean, we're not alone in that. Surely in other parts of Europe and the US, you know, as well as some of the other areas you operate in, similar trends are followed in this regard. How different would you say South Africa is to, say, Africa, and then that to Europe and the US?
Well, certainly globally, the motor industry's had, and irrespective of which brand, has had a very, very tough time. In South Africa, our factory didn't operate for just close on 3 months. So effectively, there was very little revenue for 3 months. We started 2 weeks ago. Obviously, our priority during that time was protecting our people and ensuring that we could continue keeping them safe. What we are seeing now is, as we ramp up, the biggest challenge is the fact that it's not so much the positive cases, but in the factory environment, you have those in contact that then you need to isolate in a production line environment. It creates havoc because today, in fact, yesterday, we were up at something like 15% absenteeism. That's not necessarily positive cases, but that's just contact. So you need to adapt going forward. Certainly, if we look at China obviously went into the lockdown a lot earlier. They've come back very strongly. We've seen significant growth as people try and move out of public transport and create their own mobility. We're starting to see some positive signs coming out of Europe. India, where we have a very big factory, only opened last week. Egypt, we were closed for 3 weeks. We've at least been operational for the last 6 weeks. US is only starting up now. So certainly South Africa is not alone. And the key focus now is, as we move out of or move forward and out of lockdown, is to find a balance between getting back to business and keeping our people safe. That's going to be the key challenge as we go forward.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you for that. Sipho, I know that besides your wonderful entrepreneurial insight and your contribution, you're also involved in a number of different ways in the economic front in South Africa, on the SME front, on the small business front, and also in some advisory capacity. So without touching on too sensitive, information, maybe just give us a perspective of where you see the country at the moment and what's happened through the pandemic. And because right now, if you look Western Cape versus Gauteng, you're seeing it spiking here and really ramping up here, sadly, in Gauteng, and hopefully Western Cape's reached their peak in other regions. So, and obviously we saw the president on TV the other night laying down certain regulations. And so if you just wouldn't mind giving us your perspective on it, and we realize it's just your views.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan. I guess, all of us are facing a situation that we never faced before. So to think that you have some experience in what is going on around South Africa or around the world would really be a misnomer, or something that really is not true, because all of us are grappling with the difficulties that we're facing. As you've seen around the world, other governments are succeeding or have succeeded thus far in dealing with the challenges that are there. Others in other areas, have fumbled along, but everyone is muddling along and moving forward. And I guess in South Africa, it's the same thing. We're facing the same thing. The sad part about what is currently happening is that firstly, the country was in a very difficult situation before COVID-19. But we as a result of that, of this pandemic, have found ourselves in a situation where a lot of people are losing a lot of jobs. And in fact, this is just the beginning from what one is seeing. A lot of people are going to be in trouble. A lot of businesses are going to go under. Others will survive. So it's a very difficult testing and trying time for all of us. But in the midst of all that, and I tend to look at the world and say, there are certain milestones that happen in the life of men and women, and that is, you cruise and you think this is how things are, and things change, and you are asked to reset your thought, reset your behavior, reset your business, reset your lifestyle and everything. And I think that's where we are right now. And so in a strange way, what is a problem today could easily become an opportunity for someone else. So it's a very strange thing. Even if you look around the world, the Second World War produced its own new businesses and new demands. And today, this situation lends itself in that kind of situation. So even though the situation is very gloomy, challenging and trying, but people should continue thinking, and we'll be well again. We'll be fine again. There will be casualties, but it will be fine again. Once all these things are happening. I look at things like, and there's been this big talk about the fourth industrial revolution, and I don't think we would have moved as fast as we have moved now into trying to do things virtually and other things and adding new technologies in the system if we were not catapulted and pushed by and cajoled by the COVID-19 into doing that. So we're seeing quite a lot of that. So in all the businesses I'm involved in, there's a shift. there's a shift in thinking. There's a shift in how you look at life. I mean, I went to the office today, in one of the offices that I normally go to. And I mean, it's so sad if you look at the whole block, how empty it is today. And you wonder why we even built the office block. But the work still continues. We're still producing and nothing has stopped. And it's just amazing as a result of that. So it is a difficult situation, but all of us as business people, as citizens of this country, or citizens of this world, are called upon to do more and do something else and to think. And I mean, the thinking is not going to be only in South Africa. Collaborating with the world and collaborating with other people around the world is going to be key in doing this kind of thing.
Thanks, Sipho. Thank you. Mark, so I'm going to touch on two things. So you're involved in the motor industry, and alternative energies is a big spoken about word at the moment there. And I know you guys, as a global organization, are looking at the electric cars and hybrids and various aspects. And I know Nissan's way down the road in producing something amazing. We do know that. On the other hand, Sipho, you chair a company called Sasol. Okay, yes, I know there's also a site of alternative energy, but oil would be everybody associates Sasol with oil. I know it's not only oil, but we've seen like this mad fluctuation of oil prices in the past 3 months, and a lot of equity and stock speculators coming in to ride the wave of the Sasol share price. I know you're the non-exec chairman, so I know you're not day-to-day operationally there. So Mark, tell us just briefly about where you are as a global organization. I mean, you saw what's happening with Tesla. You look at Tesla's stock price, and you look at their market cap, and you look at the wealth of a guy like Elon Musk. I mean, it's been topical the past week, where he says about he surpassed guys like Warren Buffett and various others, and a lot of hype about where that company is going, and it looks like they're doing some beautiful stuff. But Nissan, which has been around for over 100 years as prior Datsun, where are you in that regard, as let's say as a potential competitor to the Tesla?
Well, I think before I get to that, I just want to pick up on what Sipho was saying, and that is that without doubt, the new normal is not going to be the same as the past. What this extraordinary events have caused us is to refocus and reprioritize what we actually focus on from a business. And certainly we've done that globally. And one of those obviously is what are our core models and how do we move forward? And you raised the point on alternative forms of mobility, and electric vehicles is key to that now. Obviously everyone's been saying electric's going to happen. Yes, it's going to happen. I don't think any of us have really got the timing right. We're probably a little optimistic, but certainly the trend is picking up. It's growing exponentially throughout the world. We don't see everyone driving electric vehicles, but the growth rate is definitely going to continue. We're seeing technology moving very fast. One of the key elements on electric vehicles has been your cost per kilowatt hour on batteries. We've now got that down to below 100.
Sorry, Mike, would you, I've just had a request from one of the audience just saying, would you speak a little bit closer?
All right, is that better?
Yeah, they said you're a bit soft, so we just...
All right, so certainly. So, what I'm saying is so electric vehicles is very much part of the future. The only thing that none of us really got right is the timing. The trend is picking up, it's growing exponentially, it'll grow faster in different parts of the world. Tesla is a very good example. Purely a electric vehicle manufacturer. Look what they've done. For us, we expect that by 2023, we'll be selling over 1 million electric vehicles a year. Tomorrow, in fact, a good example of having to adapt is tomorrow we have a global launch of a new SUV crossover electric vehicle. Originally, it was meant to be happening to coincide with the Olympics that were about to start in Japan. We're now doing it virtually. So tomorrow morning, our time, midday in Japan, we'll have a global virtual launch of a very exciting new electric vehicle. And it's only the start of a lot of new technology that is coming. And it's not only electric, it's combining electric with a lot of other technologies, autonomous drive, elements of autonomous drive that come, but certainly alternative forms of power away from the traditional internal combustion engine are happening. It's not going to take over, not certainly in the next few years, but an exciting development, and opens up, as Sipho was saying, other opportunities, other minerals, other metals, other technologies that one needs to bring. With autonomous drive, you need very, very high levels of 3D mapping. So again, huge opportunities that come with these new technologies as we move forward.
So can we look forward, Mark, can we look forward to not too distant future, be able to purchase an electric Nissan?
Well, certainly we've been trying to sell them in South Africa, as is BMW. We just need the government to come on board and work with us in terms of opening up the environment for that.
And how would the adoption, but how would that, and interesting, you talk about South Africa, and then take a country like Egypt on the opposite spectrum of Africa, how would the adoption there of an electric vehicle be? Because that's
interesting enough, the government are very pro electric vehicles. They've lowered the duty to zero. In fact, last Sunday, the president in Egypt announced a massive CNG program to incentivize vehicles to move, convert to CNG. So they're also working on it, and it's led very much by government in terms of laying down the charge stations. Obviously, here we have different priorities at the moment, but ultimately, the adoption and move towards electric vehicles is going to happen with us. It requires government, it requires us as OEMs, and it requires education from media and facilitation. Right now, I think the cost is really up at the upper levels at the moment, and but it's coming down. It's coming down fast. As I say, 100 kilowatt and $100 a kilowatt hour is a very good rate for a battery. And I think it's going to come down even further. But certainly what we've found as people who've adopted and bought electric vehicles is they originally, obviously, they buy it, their environmental concerns, but it's the overall ownership experience. It's the driving experience that really brings them back for the second and third. So certainly having had the opportunity of driving one and spending some time with one, we will have them here soon, very soon.
Great. And then Mark, obviously, Frank asks a question. He says, so you'll have them here, but who's going to lay down the infrastructure for the charging stations? Surely that would be the responsibility of Nissan if they're going to launch in the country.
Well, I think like mobile phones, we need to all work out the same plug that plugs in. But already BMW and ourselves, we can interconnectivity between our charging stations. I think combined, we probably have over 80 spread out through South Africa. We obviously need a lot more. But one thing we must remember is that the range is growing all the time. So the electric car we brought to the market 4 years ago had a range of maybe 160 kilometers. We're probably over 400 now. So it's moving very fast.
News, I hope you'll have some charging stations near Three Sisters in the Karoo, so we'll be driving down to Cape Town.
But the other thing, Ivan, if I may just butt in, that we are just hoping that some governments, particularly ours, will continue reviewing policy so that these things could work better. Because there comes a time where the world works against you if you don't do certain things, just like we saw in things like coal, and things like asbestos that we were using in the past. There came a time when the world said, no, we're not going to use this one. So if you don't move with the time, the world will disrupt you, or you will be left behind. So these things are, in my view, are going to happen. We're going to have lots of renewables in South Africa, renewable energy and other forms of energy. We're going to slowly move away from fossil, but it will be there. But even in the way we behave, the cars, all of us have been to other countries like Germany, and I was fascinated driving a hydrogen car and look at what's going on there. And those models are going to come to South Africa because already people are talking about it and trying to influence the situation. When we talk of new industries that have to be created, these are the things that we're talking about that have to, this is what we need going forward.
And I think if I can pick up on that, what Sipho is saying is that if we look at the auto industry in South Africa, and there we must compliment government in terms of its policy and its strategy and its vision in terms of establishing it. But auto is over 7% of a contribution GDP. It's $11 billion worth of exports last year. We produce just over 600,000 vehicles. But those are all internal combustion engines. Unless we start moving towards new technology, what are we going to export? Where are we going to export to? So it's critical that we start building a market here, that we start building those technologies, that this auto industry is not here just because of South Africa. It's fundamentally is an export-based business as well. And to support that, we do need to move forward with the new technologies. And to be honest, I think we're a little slow at the moment. I understand the different priorities, but as NAMSA, we're working very closely with government to try and formulate a way forward, and with the fuel industry as we move.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So Sipho, we're going to do one more question related to the economy and the government and that. Sorry to put you in front of the line here. And then on the...
You're not going to win.
Yeah, I know that. We're getting to the first half of the show, Sipho. And then on the second half, as we're going to talk more about entrepreneurship. Bear in mind, we've got a large audience out there, not only in South Africa, there's people dialing in from different parts of the world. And I think what we need to do here this evening is to talk about the opportunities going forward, because there are many opportunities, as we know. But before we get on to that part of the show, I got a question from Oni Basarabi, and he asked if either of you, and maybe you want to take it first, Sipho, believe that the government will be able to take necessary decisions to control the government expenditure, because that is a key, and that's a challenge for the government, in order to, and then also you can control the expenditure, and then you've got to grow the economy, which is, it's easier said than done. And obviously they've, in the term that the president's been there, I mean, he's done some very favorable things, which is positive to see in terms of what came from the prior government. But there's still a concern amongst many South Africans, and not only South Africans. If you see it when you go overseas, what type of negative forces are there that still try to provoke the ANC in some form, which goes against what the president's trying to achieve. But really, do you guys believe that the government can control expenditure to grow the economy? Maybe you want to just take it first, Sipho.
Well, I mean, an economy, a developing economy, particularly an economy like South Africa, which has lots of inequality, sometimes it's never easy, in my view, to balance things out in the way that is satisfactory to everyone, because there are those that would feel that the government ought to be doing more for themselves, and the others that will feel that, we are being shortchanged for the benefit of the others. The truth of the matter is, South Africa is still going through a transition, and a transition, in my view, and looking at the history, can never be achieved, or it takes a few governments around the world who can achieve that one in a space of 20 years, 25 years. It takes a lot longer. I mean, if you look at South Africa, you've got to start with education, build that one up, and that's massive. And just so those are the challenges. But coming back to your question, do I think then that the government can control the expense, the expenditure? I just think that the contestation, to a large degree, tends to determine that, because if the certain constituencies are very strong on saying, what, guys, I need support here, and therefore could end up disrupting certain things in the country or in the industry, it becomes very difficult. But I just think that there's the lessons of the last probably 10 years are very vivid and clear in government's mind that expenditure ought to be controlled. And I think deep down, this is what they are busy with. They are working on that. But you've got to be a diplomat to deal with all these different or differing views and differing interests within the within the country.
Thanks. Mike, what's your view on that?
I think the biggest challenge, obviously, is the social disparities that exist between the wealth gap in the country, and it's going to be very difficult for the government to control or control the expenditure while that is still there, and it's going to be around for a while. But I think, as Sipho said, I think the biggest challenge is the expenditure needs to be directed in the right areas. So the control is not necessarily spending less. I think it is spending it correctly and getting more for what we spend. I think the leakages and we could have got a lot more in terms of infrastructure up to now for what we spent. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is to make sure, and there's realization in government to do that, that what we spend, we get R1 for R1. That's going to be the biggest challenge going forward. But there's a determination and a will, I think, to do it.
Thank you. Sipho, somebody who works in your organization, Nolutando, says that she says my chairman's got a real TV face. So there's a compliment coming through for you. I thought I'll let you know it.
I promise you, it could never be better than Nolutando. Nolutando is a star. I mean.
Okay, so thanks for that. Sipho, let's just talk a bit, because you're so involved in that, like myself, the two of us, we're involved in the EY Entrepreneur organization. We both contribute and have a lot of fun in, I think, I mean, it was great this year. You judged the World event, the Monte Carlo event. Sadly, you couldn't attend it because of COVID, so you did it online. I was lucky enough 3 years ago to attend it face to face, and I had a most amazing experience there. And needless to tell you, the kind of, and you've been there yourself, so you know the type of entrepreneurs that we come up against and we're able to interact with. We guys have built global industries. It's fascinating. How did it go this year? I mean, how did you enjoy it? And what's your view? I mean, you had a chance to look at so many different entrepreneurs. Are you seeing a trend globally? Are you seeing, which industries are you seeing a trend in? Was it just across the board?
No, I mean, the trend, is probably moving to what Mike and I have been talking about. And that is using more technology in all situations. You find that businesses that have been there for many, many years, they are adapting into this new world and the new normal. And the speed at which these things are done, it's just phenomenal. So there's a category of entrepreneurs that have been there for the last 20, 30, 40 years, but who are struggling and who are changing because the world is changing. Otherwise, they will soon find themselves lost in this world, because whatever they are working on could not or may not be acceptable to the market. And you're finding a lot of new ones that are just incredible. These youngsters are just amazing, the way they are coming up with great ideas. And I looked at them and I said, you know, if they came in probably 3 years, if they had another 3 years in what they are doing, in their experiences, they would be seen to have created mega and incredible businesses. And these businesses are not necessarily located in one space, but they are located across the world. I mean, I was looking at another guy who was trying to make traveling easier. And he created a business in an app that could help you move from your home in Johannesburg, get an Uber, the cheapest that you can get, and get at the cheapest airline. You get to the US in a cheaper way, and the taxi is waiting for you, or whatever is there until you get. So they map out the whole thing, and you pay just once, and it's just incredible. And the way how cheap that thing is. I mean, and you look at that and you say, these guys are just incredible. On the food side, there's this massive advancement that people are coming up with. But I will always say this: South Africans are one of the most enterprising people I have ever seen around the world. And if we could continue keeping that culture, I think we'll succeed in whatever we're doing as South Africans or as global players.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, as somebody who employs really a lot of people and a large force in South Africa and doing business up Africa and all the way into Egypt and other areas, what are you seeing from an entrepreneurial standpoint? So, is there anything you're seeing different in South Africa or in other parts of Africa? Any emerging trends coming you can highlight for the guys out there?
I think obviously the obvious one is the digital space. If we look at before the COVID crisis, we were all moving towards, especially in the auto industry, more and more digital access, shopping at home, servicing at home, but not necessarily at the speed that we should have. What this did do is forced us to accelerate and bring forward a lot of our projects that we had. And the number of people that we found who could add value to that during these times has been quite phenomenal. And something that we probably would have only brought in a year's time or 2 years' time, we've actually introduced now. We've accelerated that, and we're not going to go back. So digital interaction in terms of all your interactions on the auto industry, whether servicing at home, mobile servicing, is growing phenomenally, and that's all been brought about what's happened, and has created a new space for new people to operate in. Also, it's given, I think, in this time of work from home and a lot more interaction on digital, has given people a voice, people who you wouldn't normally have created that space in the office or in the office environment to contribute to their ideas. And it's opened up a lot of interaction on that side, where irrespective of where they fit in the organization, they've played a much bigger role in contributing to new ideas and breakthroughs. So certainly I see Africa, I see South Africa as particularly entrepreneurial. If we look at all the successful dealerships, they've all started by entrepreneurs, and they're adapting very fast.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Ivan, if I could just add one little point. I mean, I've been amazed by how disruptive entrepreneurs could be in this kind of situation. Whilst we're waiting for legislation or for certain things to happen, I mean, I work in some of the schools in the Eastern Cape where there's no, in other areas, there's no electricity. In some of them, there's no internet at all. And how quickly people are rolling out internet, and in a very strange way, and in order to allow students and kids to start participating and communicating and interacting with the world, something that has never been done. But this epidemic has forced us into thinking that way, which is what Mike was saying.
And it's really highlighted the need for accessibility to data, lower data prices.
Yeah.
And bandwidth has been the biggest limitation. We've discovered that meetings like we're having now, bandwidth is a limitation if we don't get there. So we have to accelerate that. If we want to continue on this journey, this digital journey, we have to seriously drive bandwidth and accessibility to data to everyone.
Yeah, it's. I mean, one of the someone out in the audience asked, it was Nkosi said that. I mean, to your point, Sipho, they wanted to know, like, really, how will education, play? I mean, how critical is education in achieving this goal? In other words, creating the new mindsets and the new skill sets, which formulate the new entrepreneurs that come into the world. And I think it does play a big role. And certainly the way education is delivered. I mean, you've seen now in the past 5 months how it's just switched online, and how many that do have access to internet around the world are homeschooled and are, homeschooled on the internet via their classrooms. It's unbelievable. And that doesn't just go for schools, it goes for those doing degrees, diplomas, all people studying. So I think education plays a critical role in the formulation of the new skill sets to drive entrepreneurship in the world. That's clear.
True.
But Ivan, if I can interrupt, and a good example is a number of our factory workers and operators who, under normal circumstances, would never have used this time now to get into e-learning and access a lot of different types of development. And we've actively encouraged that over the last 2.5 months. While they're sitting at home, we've offered huge amounts of e-learning programs on a variety of subjects. And the response has been phenomenal in terms of how people have wanted to take up that self-enrichment, self-empowerment to really understand and grow themselves, which has been very encouraging.
I mean, that's very encouraging, Mark, and it's good that you've taken that initiative. It'll be good to see other organizations doing something similar, because that certainly will not only, I mean, it takes people that have a lack in skill sets, putting them into skill sets and utilizing their time. So well done. It's an amazing initiative. I think the interesting, there was an interesting question where it was raised by someone who said, like, what leadership lessons can one learn, you know, in our different organizations, the businesses we're all in dealing with, one, our businesses, and dealing with the COVID pandemic. And I mean, I'll have a go at it in that we spoke about that the other day, guys. We said that, I mean, it's all very well that many businesses around the world have been able to operate remotely and certainly online, and the web's given us that opportunity. I mean, imagine if this would have happened prior to this type of accessibility. But notwithstanding that, and there's this controversial, you know, discussion that, well, everybody who had offices won't need offices post the pandemic. Now it suits me to say this possibly because in my one portfolio I do have property investments, but logically speaking, I mean, and you've got a number of people in your organization, and Sipho, under the different, you know, directorships you hold, there's hundreds and there are thousands of people. And how do you build culture remotely? I mean, how do you have an answer to that, Mike? Because I don't see, I mean, culture can run on steam and momentum because it came from a place a few months ago where everybody gathered together and were able to exchange ideas and that. And then you go into a lockup situation where people don't move out of their homes, or in some instances do go to the office on a skeleton basis. But how do you build culture remotely? Do you have some ideas in that regard?
I wish I had the answer to that. Not really. I certainly you can't do. You got to find the right balance. Total remote, total hands off or remote doesn't work. You've got to have that contact. But I think going forward, we'll certainly find a better balance than we had previously. So it's easier if you have been in an environment. I spent a lot of time in Egypt, so it's a lot easier remotely working and continue to work. But if I had never been there, to do what I've done in the last 3 months with our colleagues in Egypt would have been impossible.
Exactly, and you need to reignite that. So
Yeah.
you can run on steam for a while, and then there'll be a point in time you've got to recharge those batteries. So I'm sure that, I mean, so yeah, I actually agree with those comments. Sipho, what's your views?
You know, in this, I mean, I don't have views because the paradigm or the area that I know is this one, and this is how we've always developed culture. But we are now being forced into a new reality where culture will emerge, will evolve. What kind of culture it's going to be, I don't know. But one of the things that I find very interesting in life is that what we used to consider as soft disciplines, people like psychology and psychiatric and all of those are coming in handy today and are becoming too much of a necessity and unnecessary in dealing with our situation right now as we transition to another level. And really, I mean, when you talk about skills development, this is one skill that this country also requires, social workers who are going to help us so that we start developing a new way of thinking, a new way of life. I mean, as South Africans, we still have to deal with a past that we've never dealt with emotionally. To say, now that we're in this kind of situation, are we ready for it? Are we equipped with it? For it. Otherwise, what you end up doing is that you tend to transfer that kind of, if you had pain as a parent, you transfer it to your kids, who would transfer it to the next generation. If that is not dealt with today, it becomes a problem. So culture is going to be a very interesting one, but I just think that we're going to need quite a lot of help from these disciplines.
Thank you, Sipho. Sipho, so if we look at where we are now, all operating remotely, and some businesses having thrived through the pandemic, certainly those online businesses, and some businesses running into some serious problems during this, sadly. And whilst we all need to be positive and we need to do what we can in our various different businesses and professions to be able to maintain the status quo as it is, and then also to be able to emerge out of that maybe with a little bit more opportunity going forward. You can't help believing that the economies of the world, not South Africa, the economies of the world will be impacted. You've seen rising stock prices. We spoke about this a few weeks ago. You see rising stock prices, equity markets shooting through the roof, hitting all-time highs, gold now moving upward, and then on the other end, you're seeing a lot of casualties. And you look at the tourism industry, and you look at all aspects of the tourism industry, and that's hotels, restaurants, travel, and you can only feel pity for those involved in it. It's really tough. So for some, there's gain, for others, there's loss. But for world economy, so Mike, I mean, how do you see rising equity prices like this? Do you have any insight into that? Where you're seeing these massive rising equity prices against economies we know that are impacted by COVID?
It's a difficult one to connect, because we know what challenges our businesses have going forward, and certainly if one looks at one's cash flow, and getting back to positive cash flows is going to be a real challenge. But I think what has happened, as I said earlier, we've all had to refocus on our priorities. We've got new things that we spend a lot of time looking at, marginal profit, less fixed costs as a key indicator. And I believe that from a medium term, I think there's some good opportunities out there from an investment point of view, definitely. But how one can explain these rising not commodity prices, but equity prices is very difficult.
But I think, I mean, it's, and if you look at companies, the one we're currently using it, Zoom. I mean, we all look at the take-up of Zoom's been, look at the take-up of Netflix has been, and other streamers coming on board, during a company I use, like Peloton, which offers different forms of exercise online. I mean, they've got 2.5 million subscribers running at an average rate of or entry-level price of $12 per month per subscriber. I mean, those businesses have just seen those businesses like skyrocket overnight. It's unbelievable, because so many people are now home exercising around the world, and also interacting. So you're seeing those opportunities. Now, to those that are listening, I mean, people are wondering, well, where is their opportunity? I know there are a lot of people in South Africa thinking, well, South Africa is really bad. Will it ever come out of this? Is it going to be, for many, we are in South Africa at the moment, and the opportunities are, this is where you live. This is where your families are, and this is what you know, and this is where you study, some of you. So I don't think you have a choice but to make it happen. Yeah, I mean, why would you?
But I think that's one of our roles as business. I think certainly as South Africans, we can't sit back and say to government, what are you going to do about stimulating the economy going forward? We all need to really put our energies into what are we going to do to get the economy back on track. And certainly as an auto industry, we're doing a lot of work of how we bring it back, how we can actually stimulate demand, not individually, but as an industry, and open up opportunities. We've about to launch as an auto industry the industrial fund, automotive fund, which will be aimed at investing both upstream and downstream in the auto industry, particularly into small businesses. There's a lot of that I think we all need to focus on. We need to focus on how we can contribute as business and business people in the country to get the growth back, because we can't just expect and rely on government to do it.
Yeah, true. I mean, if you look at various industries, I mean, I can talk for the mining sector. I know that there's a lot of work that is going on in terms of resuscitating and kickstarting and creating new projects in the industry. There's lots of work that is going on in the oil and gas sphere. There's lots of work that is going on the electricity sector, and all of it is driven by the private sector that is just working and putting together certain plans to look at that. Because as Mike correctly says, we're not going to sit and do nothing. I mean, a human being is not meant to just retire, because when you retire, I'm 80 years old, so if I just retire, it means my time is up. So there's just no need for me to do that. So we continue working with small businesses, and we're working with all other sectors, and in some instances we have to we deal with policy changes and try to encourage government to do certain things. And I mean, everyone can see that we need that one. So the private sector will continue to play a key role, because if we don't do this thing and we don't do put all effort in pushing the country forward, I think we will really regret going forward. And I mean, where else would you go? You keep on running around the world, which is fine. I mean, you can do that. But for others, South Africa is the only country they have, and we have to do just that and work along those lines.
I mean, Sipho, I agree with you, and it's easy to, obviously people, I mean, it's easy to complain and do nothing about it. Now, I don't want to be insensitive, because there are a lot of people that have a lot to complain about, and people will always expect more from governments, and governments will give. So you're always going to, in some way, feel let down by a government in some form, because it can never produce everything that the citizens want. But I know that there's a big push at the moment, and I know it's something you're involved in the stimulation and growth of small business in this country. And I mean, just maybe quick 1 minute, to give the guys some hope out there. Tell them, what the country is doing to stimulate the growth of SMEs. And SMEs, we know, are the driver of the economy at the end of the day, because you need that growth and stimulation.
SMEs are battling a little bit right now, simply because I don't think we've taken that sector or that group of people seriously. I mean, Bernard Swanepoel likes to say small businesses is not a sector, is not an industry on its own, but it's each and every sector has got small business in it. So it is something that all of us have to do that. I mean, Mike and the motor industry do quite a lot of work in terms of stimulating small businesses and giving them opportunities to supply them with product. So, but there are certain constraints that make it very difficult. One, you start a business, but payment terms tend to be a little bit onerous. Two, legislation. Sometimes there's no differentiation between a big business and a small business in the way you are treated. So it's all those things that we've got to confront and deal with, and we're spending a lot of time on that.
And cash flows, which is, Mark, that's a big
cash
issue.
Flow is what it's all about at the moment.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why, what's also interesting, which kind of a lesson one's learning through this, I mean, gearing was, everyone talks about gearing, and how in vogue it was, prior to the pandemic, and many years before that. We saw that moving up to 2008. I mean, how highly geared the property sector was. Certainly in the US, we saw what happened, and in other parts. But I mean, one lesson to learn through, and for those listening, is that, the strength of a balance sheet of any company is paramount, because you never know when the downturn's coming, and you can't always just be on risk. And I think those businesses that went into the pandemic with strong balance sheets will come out of the pandemic okay. Certainly those industries that can. But going in, you can blame, obviously many can blame the pandemic, rightly so, on the downturn of the business sector. But if you went in with, as I say, strong balance sheet, but going into this with a weak balance sheet, I think is pretty risky. And I think it's a lesson. And to all you guys out there that are starting businesses or thinking of starting businesses or not just about to, Obviously, starting a business, you've got to bootstrap your way up till success is reached. You know, because starting a business is never easy unless you've got access to a lot of borrowings, or you've got, if you're lucky enough to have family money, but that can back you. But you need to be very prudent in how you borrow cash and how you borrow and your funding structure in any organization, because this is a lesson, you know, it's a very hard lesson and sadly very tougher for many to learn going into it. And I think that's certainly something I'm seeing coming out of this, is that how important, and Mike, you'll see it right throughout your organization in different parts of the world. Nissan is an organization, a very well capitalized and healthy business, you know, and Sipho, in the different businesses you sit, you've seen the strength of a balance sheet. But where it's been weak, you know, when you can't always hope for good times. It just doesn't always happen. I mean, we do, but that shouldn't stop anybody. That shouldn't. Those of you that are thinking of, you know, leaving, as I spoke about it 2 weeks ago, leaving and going on your own or starting a business, you know, don't be nervous. I mean, but just watch your funding and just watch how you can manage through that. And should another downturn come, because good times are great, businesses, you know, fly in the good times, but I think in tough times, strength of funding important. I don't know, Mark, if you've got something to add to that.
I think certainly in previous secular activities, obviously as a global business, we had some parts of the world doing well, we had others that were struggling. None of us could have foreseen that we would have literally on a global basis a revenue standstill for 2 months, 2 to 3 months. And it doesn't matter how well capitalized you are, you're going to have to you've got to have to work hard to survive 3 months, and certainly that's been the biggest lesson to all of us, that you never know what's coming, and the perfect storm is when it happens globally.
All right, guys, we're nearing the end of the hour. And Sipho, I know what a positive, gregarious entrepreneur you are, and very thought-provoking as well, and inspiring. So maybe a few words of inspiration, and give us some of your eternal optimism going forward, because you're a natural optimist.
You mean I'm a sucker for optimism, which is true. Let's face it. I mean, I just believe that all of us as human beings have got dreams and we've got ideas, but that said, we also have fears and serious concerns in life. So if you have an idea, that idea means nothing until and unless you start acting on it and doing something about it. You will dream all your life, but you'll get nowhere if you don't act on it. And I see here we have created a family of people who are interested in moving forward. All of us are here to assist in whatever form, for as long as it's not money, because I don't have it, but in whatever form. If we're talking advice, if we're talking guidance, Mike is there, you are there, Ivan, and even the rabbi is here to give us that guidance all the time. So honestly, act on what you have. Otherwise, you will all forever regret that I had it, but I never used it.
Thanks, Sipho. That's great to hear that. And I totally agree with everything you say. I mean, execution is the key to success. Yeah. And relentless execution. Mike, some positive words from you and to everyone out there, and those that are looking to get out there, and you know what we don't, just maybe some thoughts from all your many years of very positive experience.
I think certainly we've all lived through the ups and the downs, and looking forward, we certainly haven't stopped at all with our goal. We've continued during the shutdown, during the pandemic, to continue the investment program with a new product that we'll start manufacturing towards the end of this year, because we really believe that this is a long-term business. It's not short-term. We see the opportunities in the long term, And as you say, we've got to just keep executing. We maybe change the game plan a bit, but certainly if you go and put yourself in a hole, you're not going to get anywhere. So we've kept the momentum, we've kept the focus, and we've adjusted the actions to get to that goal, but we've been fairly relentless in keeping focus on where we want to end up.
Well done. We wish you lots of luck at Nissan, Mark, in that regard. So guys, I mean, just to also sum up, yes, there are challenges. Yes, it's tough at the moment, and there's a lot of nasty things happening around us, but there's a lot of good things happening around us as well. And I certainly think if, Sipho, to your point, if you've got the dreams, pursue those dreams in the form of real execution and sensible execution. You know, different times present different opportunities. Different countries present different opportunities. But there's an opportunity in every country and in every time within that your time and where you are in your life. You're not alive forever. You make opportunities happen while you can, and you've got the energy and the drive and the ambition. Don't wait for tomorrow. That's my advice, actually. And to both of you, Mark and Sipho, you're very good and very supportive people to the organization. Mike, I know every year there's when you go and you do your inventory check, there's one less vehicle or a few less vehicles. And there are many people that are grateful for what you've done over so many years. And we know the kind of good work you do. And you as well, Sipho, your support for the organization as well. I mean, I'm sure it's much appreciated by many, not only in just what you give, and although you're not saying, you are a very generous individual, so thank you. And to everybody else who put it together, I don't know if we're turning to you, Hilly, now, or Ryan, to close out. So thanks to everyone who's been on this evening, and thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you gained a bit of insight in some form, and we hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Sure. Thank you, guys. So just to sign it off, I know Hilly's having some problems. And just to close off the event, firstly to you, Ivan, you know, thank you for your advice, regardless of your facilitation. And thank you for your brilliant facilitation and your unique ability to, you know, get the best out of these incredible businessmen. Thanks for your time, you know, your efforts, and for encouraging such an insightful discussion, and for sharing your lessons that you have shared with us today. Before I address the panelists of this evening, I'd like to thank again to the Chabad Young Drivers and all our sponsors for bringing us these weekly talks and facilitating these events. It's really been an honor to be part of such an organization where these are made possible. You know, in a time of pre-COVID, it's really it's very rare to merely have the presence or share the room of such, you know, with such businessmen like yourselves, let alone have their own personal and insightful views and thoughts. So we really appreciate that. If you've been a constant supporter of our webinars over the past 6 weeks, you'll note that we've had successful family offices to established entrepreneurs such as Ivan himself, to young successful entrepreneurs and motivational speakers. Tonight, we've really had the opportunity of listening to two of South Africa's most influential, successful and prominent businessmen in their respective yet correlated industries. And on top of that, facilitated by the successful entrepreneur, Ivan Epstein himself. Tonight's discussion's theme was based on the road ahead and where to from here. I know we've all have more of a clear path, gained confidence in our country and the economic standpoint we're in, knowing that these incredible men have a footprint in our future. On that note, a huge thank you to you, Sipho, and to you, Mark, for your time this evening, your insight into your relevant corporates, and for sharing us with your stories and lessons during these challenging times. We really do appreciate it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you to the audience for your attendance. Without you and your constant support, these events wouldn't be possible. I hope this talk has given you a sense of the road ahead and added value to your week. And on behalf of the young drivers and the Chabad, stay safe and stay tuned for upcoming talks, and thanks and have a great evening. Over to you, Aaron.
I don't